you could imagine off ramps, but it probably would take a different personality than Benjamin Netanyahu, given where he is in his thinking and where this whole war is as we near the 1 year anniversary of the terrible tragedy of last October 7th. It's pretty clear Israel will respond about, as you just said. I think the most minimal kind of response you could envision would be a beefed up version of what Israel did back in April, when Iran launched 300 plus missiles and drones at Israel. Again, like this time, almost all were intercepted. And Israel sent back some limited strikes against air defense capabilities around the Iranian nuclear enrichment facility, partly as a message to Iran to say, we could have hit the enrichment facilities if we had wanted to, and maybe we will next time. So I still think there's a chance that Israel will go after the underground facilities. It would require some of the same kind of successive bomb jackhammering that we saw kill Nasrallah in Lebanon, because Israel doesn't have a weapon powerful enough to just get down to those facilities in one fell swoop. But there's a good chance that Israel could take out the Iranian air defense network and then go ahead and do that. It's a long flight for any of the aircraft involved, but I wouldn't rule that out. But it's more likely, as again you said a few minutes ago, that Israel will do something that's big but different than that, and probably targeting oil and energy and money, the Iranian regime's ability to keep itself afloat, especially at a time when sanctions evasion has become more rampant and Iran's earning more money than we really wanted them to under the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Of course, the U.S. hasn't really even responded or returned to that framework, but it's still there with other countries. And Israel could say, listen, if sanctions won't work, how about bombs? And we can do the same sort of thing. But then that invites a response by Iran to shut down the Strait of Hormuz to shipping in general, or at least to complicate shipping through the Persian Gulf. And so I think Israel would actually be wise to look for an off-ramp, but I don't think they will.
Why then, Michael, use brute force in the form of bunker busting bombs or whatever would get the Israeli military down to that level underground where the nuclear facilities are? Why not use a cyber attack, as we saw with Stuxnet? That is something that Iran might not even acknowledge publicly.
Well, if you could do it, sure. But as you'll recall, Stuxnet was based partly on good luck. I think somebody left a thumb drive in a parking lot, and that allowed us to, or took a thumb drive maybe that we had deposited in a parking lot and put it into a machine, and then Stuxnet was unleashed, and then the whole world found out because it spread further than intended. But it also only took down their centrifuges for a few months. And you could say, well, maybe that's good enough, except that Iran is now so close to a nuclear weapon that I think slowing them down for a few months in something they could probably recover from after that would not be seen as ample. And moreover, I doubt very much Israel has the access to those machines that we managed to, by trick and by guile, find our way to, according to public reports, a dozen years ago. So I don't think we have a Stuxnet option. I don't think Israel does either.
Wow.
Well, of course, Joe and I have had a lot of conversations in recent days as we've considered this question around Iran's nuclear facilities, of whether that would mean they rush to actually make a weapon, not just develop the components of that, what the consequence could be that Iran does in response to that. There's also the question, Michael, and that's especially relevant to our audience here at Bloomberg, about the Strait of Hormuz and whether Iran could be, if attacked severely enough, on the cusp of making a decision to choke off the export of energy from the Gulf. We've certainly seen oil prices with their biggest weekly spike since October of 2022 this week, potentially out of concern for that. Do you think that is actually a warranted concern?
Yes, I think it's certainly one that has double-digit probabilities associated with it. Whether it's 10%, 20, or 50, I don't know. But I think there is a decided chance that Israel will attack Iran's oil economy, and that Iran will respond not by attacking Israel again, which it's proven itself relatively incapable of doing, at least with this missile approach, but instead by trying to hurt the whole world economy and hurt the United States in the process. Now, they might, Benjamin Netanyahu probably would like to see Donald Trump elected. I'm not sure the Iranian leadership wants that. And so to throw the world economy into a tizzy a few weeks before a U.S. election, you have to think through the effects on American politics if you're in Iran's shoes. But I think there's a decided chance that, yes, they would, in fact, take that approach. Would it be permanent? No. The Saudis could build more pipelines over their territory and go by land. We could go in and try to clear out whatever Iran was doing in the Persian Gulf by way of laying mines and using fast attack boats against ships and whatever else. I don't know that we would succeed perfectly, but we've escorted ships in the Persian Gulf before. So you could imagine ways to recover from this, but it would probably take a few weeks or maybe longer. And even after that point, you might have a state of low-grade ongoing hostilities with some chance of oil tankers still being hit, even once we've reopened things. So I think Iran might very well consider that approach. It works against their interests as well. So part of it depends on how hard Israel strikes them. If Israel really shuts down the Iranian oil economy, then Iran has no reason to tolerate the rest of the world using the Strait of Hormuz. But if Israel takes out 5%, leaving 95% still effectively as hostage, then maybe Iran doesn't go that route and maybe does continue with the call for a ceasefire.
Spending time with Michael O'Haley from Brookings, I was really struck by a piece of reporting in the Washington Post I wanted to ask you about here, Michael, that maybe we haven't fully understood the amount of damage that Iran brought to Israel in this most recent attack. Turns out, based on videos that have been verified by the Post, at least 24 long-range Iranian ballistic missiles broke through Israeli and allied air defenses on Tuesday night, striking or landing near at least 3 military and intelligence installations. Did Iran do a better job than they were first given credit for?
That's an excellent question. And you're right that the Post has done good reporting and that the Israelis have understandably been quiet about this. They don't want Iran to think that they've been successful. Clearly, if there was enough damage done, there'd be no doubting it because all sorts of commercial satellites would have shown the damage by now. And so I have to suspect that the damage was not that severe. But you're right, there's a big difference between a dozen getting through and zero. And back in April, by all reports, basically zero got through. It does seem that very few people were hurt, regardless of whether some buildings were damaged. But you're right to raise that distinct possibility. And we really don't have a firm understanding of whether the intercept probability was 90%, 95%, 99%. It's still an open question.
Michael, there is a new big take piece out on the Bloomberg terminal that can be found on the terminal or online. And the headline reads as follows: widening Mideast conflict shows limit of U.S. leverage with Israel. The essential thesis of the piece here, Michael, is that the U.S. can only do so much to actually influence the outcomes and what the Israeli government does. Is the U.S. desire to see things ease in the region anything that they're frankly telling the Netanyahu government consequential at this point, or does it not matter?
It's an excellent question. I don't know if the United States has had major leverage in any crisis over Israel since 1956, the Suez Crisis. It's the last one where I can really feel or say that the United States essentially carried the day. Maybe in the 73 Middle East War, but Israel wanted our help in a sense, at least initially. And then we put pressure on them to agree to a ceasefire sooner than they wanted, but we still had their back. And their overall goals were not fundamentally different from what they achieved. And so in that regard, I think it's been a half century, at least, maybe longer, since we've really been able to coerce Israel into a plan of action that we preferred. And the last time it was really even tried by the United States, except through browbeating and persuasion, was the first Bush administration suspending loan guarantees when the Israelis continued with occupation development, with housing development in the occupied territories, especially in the West Bank. And so it's been 30 plus years since anybody really even tried to use more than just nice words to persuade Israel to do something that we wanted them to do. I can go through other cases. George W. Bush shut down Iraqi airspace, according to public accounts, when the Israelis wanted to think about bombing Iran back in 2004, 5, 6, when we controlled Iraqi airspace. And at that time, we told them no, and they had to take that for an answer because we were essentially the occupying power formally in that zone. We don't have control over Iraqi airspace anymore. My whole point, you can see, is that I don't know how often we have been able to tell Israel what to do as a sovereign nation, and we usually haven't even tried that hard. I do think we should try harder. I would withhold some of the 2,000-pound bombs they've been using in Gaza, for example. But for the most part, this is not news. This is not something that just happened with Biden and Netanyahu.